Alright, in these videos we're going to review some basic stuff about linear equations and the different forms you can write their equations in. So we're going to do some slope intercept, some point slope, etc. So we're going to start with basically slope. So in this example it says find the slope between each set of points. Now slope is an extremely important concept in trig and also in calculus. Believe it or not, if you take calculus, pretty much the entire first half of calculus involves slopes and finding slopes of different functions, and that's because a slope is nothing more than a rate of change. So generally speaking, when you got points like this, like xy coordinates, the way I define slope is defined as being rise over run. Okay? Or another way of thinking that rise is how much the y value changes, because y, is how far you go up or down. So rise is change in y, and run, x, is change in x. Okay? So how do you find the change in y and the change in x? Well, to find the change in something, you just subtract. So if you don't remember, the basic formula for finding slope or finding the rate of change between 2 points is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so you're going to have 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, just like all these have 2 points. And you just subtract them. Now, you might be wondering, how do I decide which point is point number 1 and which point is point number 2? And the answer is, it does not matter. You will get the same answer regardless of which point is which, as long as you keep it consistent. So here's what I mean by that. So if I look at the first one, I got the points 3, 5, and 1, 5. So one of these points is going to be point 1 and one is going to be point 2. It doesn't matter which one. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'll make this one point 1. So I'll make that x1, that would be y1. This one will be point 2, so it'll be x2. This coordinate will be y2. And now to find a rate of change, or the slope, I'm just going to plug these into this formula. So y2 minus y1 becomes 5 minus 5 in the numerator, and x2 minus x1 becomes 1 minus 3 in the denominator. So if I simplify this, 5 minus 5 is 0. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. So I end up with 0 over negative 2. Now, how do I simplify 0 divided by negative 2? Well, 0 divided by anything is simply 0. So this one ends up having a slope of 0. Okay? So what does a slope of 0 means? A slope of 0 means that if you were to graph this equation, it would be a horizontal line. It would be flat, because a slope of 0 means it has no rise. Like the change in y was 0. It has no rise. It only has run. So slope is 0. All right, now look at this next example, B down here. I've got negative 10, 7, negative 10, 9. Okay, so once again, I'll just make the first point, point 1, and the second point, point 2, but it doesn't matter. So y minus y, I'm going to make 9 minus 7. X minus x, I got negative 10 minus a negative 10. Be careful when you're subtracting a negative that you include both the minus sign and the negative sign, because if you don't, you will get the wrong answer. So, okay, 9 minus 7 is 2, of course. But what is negative 10 minus negative 10? Well, it's the same thing, minus itself, and minus a negative is plus, so we actually end up with negative 10 plus 10, and negative 10 plus 10 is 0, so we end up with 2 over 0. So, be careful with this, because what is 2 divided by 0? Well, you cannot divide by 0. 2 divided by 0 is undefined. Okay? It is undefined. You cannot divide by 0, because 0 goes into anything an infinite number of times. That's why you can't divide by 0. So this has an undefined slope. What an undefined slope means is if you were to graph this this line, it would be a vertical line. In other words, it has rise, but its run is 0. Its change in x is 0. So it'd be a straight vertical line. It has an undefined slope. Okay, so be careful. 0 divided by a number is 0, but a number divided by 0 is undefined. They're not the same thing. They are different. Okay, so if the answer is 0 and you put undefined or vice versa, you're going to get it wrong. All right, so let's look over here. C and D are going to be non-special cases. I'm going to get an actual answer that's not 0 undefined for both these. So same thing, I'll make this point point number 2 and this point number 1. So I'll take 15 minus 12 on the top, or in the numerator, because that's change in y. And since I did 15 minus 12, I have to do negative 5 minus negative 4 in the denominator. So minus negative 5 minus negative 4. So 15 minus 12 is 3. Negative 5 minus negative 4. Minus a negative is, plus a positive, so it's negative 5 plus 4, which is just negative 1. So my answer is 3 over negative 1. Now there are multiple ways you can write this. I just want to point out, because 3 divided by negative 1, you could simplify this to just be just negative 3, because 3 divided by negative 1 is negative 3. Other ways you could write this answer and still be correct, technically, you could have negative 3 divided by 1. Like, it doesn't matter. If there's a negative sign, it doesn't matter if it's on the numerator or denominator. Both these simplify to negative 3. The only thing you couldn't do, be careful, is if you had negative 3 over negative 1, whoops, negative 3 over negative 1, that simplifies to positive 3, which is not the same thing. So be careful with that. Okay, last example here with slope. I got the point negative 6, 0 in 2, 3, so I'll make this point 2 again, this point 1. But although once again the order doesn't matter, so in the numerator, y minus y becomes 3 minus 0. In the denominator, 2 minus negative 6, x minus x. So 3 minus 0 on top, 2 minus negative 6 on the bottom. 3 minus 0 is, of course, just 3. 2 minus negative 6 is like 2 plus 6, which is 8. So I end up with 3/8. Now, if you wanted to, you could make this into a decimal, but I would just leave it as 3/8. I would leave my answer in that form because it's easy to see the change in. Because basically what this is saying is change in y over change in x. Every time y changes by 3 units, x is changing by 8 units. Okay, so there you have it. Slope. Just be careful that you are the difference between 0 and undefined slope, and be careful with your negatives when you're subtracting negatives. It's easy to mess that up, so just be careful when you're doing that.